You waited. You waited so long that you began to doubt everything. Your intuition, your faith, your reading of what was happening in your life. You waited for an answer that seemed obvious to everyone but you. You waited for a sign that took so long that, when it finally arrived, your first feeling wasn't gratitude. It was exhaustion. It was almost indifference. It was that strange sensation of someone receiving the key after having already broken down the door. If you feel this now, pay close attention to what I am going to say. Because you are not late. You are not abandoned. You are not being tested by a sadistic force that finds amusement in leaving you in the dark. What happened during all that time of waiting has a name, has a function, and has a spiritual logic that has crossed all human traditions for thousands of years. And when you understand this logic, three things will change forever. Your relationship with waiting. Your relationship with the people and sources you consulted while trying to anticipate the answer. And your relationship with your own capacity to listen directly, without intermediaries, without translations, without needing anyone's stamp of approval. This video is about exactly that. About why the biggest warnings of your life arrived late, and why that wasn't a defect, but a design. About what was happening inside you during the silence, and about the exact moment you begin to realize that the entire structure of people, books, mentors, guides, and figures you consulted to understand your own life is about to lose the function it once had. Not because they were wrong, but because you have grown beyond them. And when that happens, a specific type of loneliness comes that feels like anguish, but is maturity. I will show you how to go through this without getting lost and without turning back. Perhaps you recognize this pattern in your recent history. You feel that something important is about to happen. You have felt it for weeks, perhaps months.
Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life, a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming, with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10,000 readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who were tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.
There is a weight in your chest that won't go away, a discomfort that has no name, and restlessness that comes in waves. You look for answers. You talk to people close to you, read books, listen to podcasts, consult those you trust, pay for sessions with professionals, open your phone several times a day, waiting for a message that will clarify everything. Everyone tells you something different, and the more you consult, the more lost you become. Because each piece of advice carries the history of the one who gave it, not yours. Each outside vision projects an outside life, and you, in the center of so many voices, realize that you are increasingly distant from your own voice. Then comes a day when everything goes silent. Not because you found peace, because you are exhausted. You exhausted the external sources. You exhausted the hypotheses. You exhausted the hope that someone from the outside would hand you the finished map. And it is in this silence, usually when you have already given up looking, that the answer appears. But it appears in a way you didn't expect. Not through the wisest person you know, not through the most respected book on the shelf. It appears in an apparently banal sentence, spoken by someone unlikely. It appears in an old memory that resurfaces for no apparent reason. It appears in a dream in the early hours. It appears in a moment when you are driving alone at night, in silence, and suddenly you understand. Everything makes sense. What needed to be done, what needed to be said, what needed to be left behind. And your first reaction after the initial relief is a kind of thin rage. Why so late? Why didn't this understanding arrive 3 months ago when I was at rock bottom? Why did I have to suffer all this time if the answer was this, so simple, so clear, so close at hand? This question is the key to everything you will understand today, and its answer will bother you before it sets you free. Before I continue, I have a sincere request. If you feel that this content was made for this specific moment in your life, subscribe to this channel. It is not for me. It is because the algorithm needs a signal to understand that this type of deep conversation deserves to reach more people who are lost in the same silence as you. Subscribing is your way of ensuring that content like this continues to appear for you when you need it most. And it is also your way of caring for those who haven't arrived here yet but are searching. Returning to the central question, why so late? The answer begins with an observation that runs through all the serious spiritual traditions of the world. Before any true revelation, there is always a period of silence. It is not an aesthetic detail. It is a functional principle. Think of the great spiritual stories that have spanned centuries. Before the voice that changes life, there is the desert. Before the enlightenment under the tree, there are years of exhaustive searching and silent renunciation. Before definitive clarity, there is the darkest night. Before the transformative dawn, there is a period when the light seems to have disappeared completely. This pattern is not poetic, it is functional, and it works because truth has weight. A real truth, when received by an unprepared consciousness, does not transform. It distorts. It turns into fanaticism, into pride, into a shortcut, into a crutch, into arrogant certainty. Hence, the silence. The silence is not punishment. It is preparation of the vessel. During those weeks, those months when you felt abandoned, something was being removed from inside you without you realizing it. Attachments to conventional answers, beliefs about how your life should be, identifications with roles that no longer served you, ties to easy explanations that had ceased to explain, hopes based on old models you inherited without questioning. If the answer had arrived 3 months ago, it would have hit a version of you that was still full of certainties, full of defenses, full of previous answers that occupied the space where the new one needed to enter. You would have heard the sentence, but you wouldn't have truly listened. You would have seen the sign, but you wouldn't have recognized it. You would have received the map, but you wouldn't have known how to read it. You would have received the key, but you would have tried to fit it into the old lock. And that is why many people throughout their lives receive the same answer several times without recognizing it. Because they remain full, because the inner vessel is never emptied. Hence the time. Each day of that waiting removed a layer. Each difficult night undid a resistance. Each conversation that didn't help you pushed you a millimeter further into yourself. Each disappointment with a source you idealized refined your perception of who really knows and who just reproduces. And when the understanding finally arrived, it found an open space. It found an empty vessel. And only an empty vessel receives without distorting the received content. This completely changes the reading you have of your recent history. What seemed to be wasted time was time being built. What seemed to be absent silence was silent sculpting. The force that many call God, others call the universe, others call the intelligence of life or simply life, does not have the clock of human desperation. It has the schedule of maturation, and maturation does not accelerate by insistence. Maturation obeys an internal law that is not broken by request. You can ask 1,000 times for the fruit to ripen in 3 days when it needs 3 months, but the fruit does not obey, and fortunately so, because fruit accelerated by haste becomes rotten inside and raw outside. If this shift in reading is already stirring something inside you, leave your like on this video. This simple gesture, which takes 3 seconds, helps us understand that this type of content is connecting with those who need it, and more people in Brazil and around the world will start receiving this same understanding. But there is a second part to this story that few people have the courage to touch, and this second part is where the most radical transformation you can go through in this phase of life resides. During all that time of waiting, you didn't just stand still. You looked for help. And it is normal to look for help. There is nothing wrong with consulting people, with reading, with seeking references. The problem is not in consulting. The problem is in something that happened without you realizing it at some point in the consultation. You outsourced your own discernment. There is a gigantic difference between consulting someone and depending on someone. When you consult, The other person's word enters as one of the many elements that you will weigh internally in your own inner tribunal, with your own authority in command. When you depend, the other person's word replaces your inner weight. You start to expect that person, that book, that channel, that guide, that therapist, that friend who is always right, to hand you the finished answer for you to just execute. And here lies a serious spiritual problem that no one usually talks to you about openly. Every time you outsource your listening, you strengthen an internal structure that I will name here as the figure of the investigator. The figure of the investigator is that part of your psyche that has already given up on receiving directly. It is the part of you that needs an external stamp before accepting what you feel. It is the part that, even when you already know the answer, still wants to hear it from someone else to be sure. It is not evil. It was born for protection. At some point in your life, you were punished for trusting your own reading, for following your intuition when it contradicted the rule, for saying what you felt without the approval of an authority. Maybe it was in childhood, with an adult who ridiculed what you felt. Maybe it was in a religious institution that taught you that only a specific figure could translate the sacred for you. Maybe it was in an adult relationship where your opinion was only heard after passing through the filter of the other. Maybe it was at work, where your perception that something was wrong was discarded several times before proving to be correct. The figure of the investigator learned early on that it was safer to consult than to trust. And here I want to ask you something direct. At what moment in your life did you learn that your perception alone was not enough? Think about it for a few seconds. Go back in your memory. Look for the first event. And when you remember, write in the comments the phrase direct source followed by whatever comes to your mind about this first memory. This exercise seems small, but it begins a process of reconnection with your own inner authority. Naming the original event takes power away from it. And reading the comments of other people living the same pattern will show you that you are not alone in this process. This pattern is collective, generational, cultural, and it only leaves through the light of shared consciousness. Returning to the theme, the figure of the investigator was born for real protection at some point in your history. But at some point it went from protection to prison. You grew up, gained experience, went through losses, survived things that some of the people you consult have never gone through. You accumulated a real-life knowledge that is worth more than many diplomas on the wall. And even so, in important moments, you still run to ask. You still want someone to tell you if the feeling you are having is true. You still want a stamp. And the problem is that every time you look for the stamp, before honoring your own listening, you confirm to your unconscious a toxic phrase that steals from you little by little. My perception alone is not worth it. This phrase, repeated silently thousands of times over decades, becomes a psychic structure, and the structure needs to fall, not out of resentment against those who taught you, out of maturity. The fall of this structure is exactly what was being prepared during all that time of waiting. Time was not just removing beliefs about your outer life, about your practical decisions. It was weakening the inner dependence on intermediaries, each piece of advice that didn't work, each wise person who was wrong, each book that seemed revealing and later proved shallow, each person you idealized who showed themselves to be just human, with their own confusions, each therapist who helped you with some things, but not all. All of this, which you read as disappointment and loss of faith, was actually the ground being prepared for the most important recognition of spiritual maturity, that there is a direct listening, and it is yours, and it has always been yours, and it never needed a translator. And when this perception arrives, a question comes with it that will haunt you for the next few days. If direct listening was always available, why did I spend so much time looking for someone to speak in its place? The answer to this question is painful, but it is the most important portal of this phase of your life. And it is exactly the theme of the next video on this channel, which I am preparing with great care to publish in the coming days. To ensure it reaches you at the exact moment it will serve you, turn on the notification bell now. Activating the bell is your silent way of saying that you want to continue this journey of direct reconnection without losing any link in this chain. Now let's go to the practical part. How do you start to undo the dependence without falling into the opposite extreme, which is the arrogance of thinking you don't need anyone. Because this extreme is also a grave trap. Direct listening is not narcissistic loneliness. It is inner sovereignty and open dialogue with the world, without submission to it. You still listen to others. You still consult when it makes sense. You still read. You still learn. You still receive guidance. The difference is that all of this enters as input and not as a final sentence. The first practical movement is to recognize the symptom of dependence in your daily life. The clearest symptom is the urgency to consult before feeling. Every time something important happens, and before you allow yourself to feel what you feel, you are already picking up your phone to send a message to someone, to open a bedside book, to look for content, to ask for the opinion of those you trust. This impulse is the figure of the investigator wanting to keep its job inside you. When you notice this impulse, instead of obeying automatically, you pause. Not to ignore the other person forever, to let your own listening have the first minutes of contact with the news, with the event, with the perception. These first minutes are sacred, and most people give them away immediately to someone else's opinion. The second movement is to differentiate perception from thought. Direct listening does not arrive as a thought. Thought is noisy, it is circular, it is argumentative, it is full of voices inherited from other people. Direct listening arrives as a small, silent certainty. It doesn't come with an elaborate justification. It is. You know the difference because thought tires you, and direct listening settles you. Thought increases anxiety. Direct listening dissolves anxiety, even when its content is difficult. When you receive a hard but true perception, the body rests, even without you agreeing with what was received. When you receive an anxious thought, the body contracts, even if the content seems comforting. The body does not lie. It tells you all the time which channel you are tuning into. The third movement is loyalty to what is received. This is the hardest of all. When you receive directly, a huge temptation comes to submit that to the scrutiny of other people. You want to test it. You want to see if others validate it. This test, done too soon, kills what was received, because what was received is born fragile, like any living thing. It needs a few hours, sometimes a few days, inside you, in silence, being respected by you before being offered to the world's opinion. Submitting it too soon is aborting it before birth. Many precious things you received throughout your life were killed before they lived, because you ran to tell 3 people on the same day, and each one brought a different reaction, and what was clear turned into a cloud. What was yours turned into common property. What was sacred turned into a topic of conversation. This is where many people of your generation get stuck. The generation of those who are over 35 today, especially in Brazil, was raised in a world that rewarded the opinion of others above one's own perception. You grew up hearing that you needed to listen to the elders, the most experienced, the most educated, the most authorized by institutions. And there is real value in that. There is wisdom in listening to those who have lived longer. But this value became a trap when it replaced, instead of complementing, your listening. Today you are at a phase of life where this equation needs to be inverted. Not in the sense of ignoring the knowledge of others, in the sense of returning to your own perception, the place of origin it always had. The knowledge of others enters as a counselor, but the throne is yours. And when the counselor tries to sit on the throne, with the best of intentions, it is your function to politely return them to the counselor's seat. Think of a very Brazilian daily scene. You leave work in the late afternoon. It could be the heavy traffic of São Paulo, Rio, Brasilia, Belo Horizonte, or it could be the empty road between a small town and your home. You are driving alone. A thought arrives. That thought that seems simple but comes with weight. About a decision you have been putting off for weeks. About a difficult conversation you need to have with someone in your family. About a professional path you know you need to take, but are afraid of. You feel the thought. It has clarity. And immediately your mind starts looking for who you are going to tell this to first, who you are going to consult, who you are going to listen to before acting. Pause. Drive for 5 more minutes with that inside you without doing absolutely anything with the thought. Don't write it on your phone. Don't send an audio to anyone. Don't open the messaging app. 5 minutes alone with your perception without haste to submit it to external judgment. These 5 minutes, repeated hundreds of times over the months, redo your relationship with your own listening. They return to you the throne you abdicated too soon. There is an old word that describes this process better than any modern term. The word is discernment. Discernment is not distrust of the world. It is not defensive closing off. It is not spiritual arrogance. Discernment is the capacity to receive information from various sources, external and internal, and recognize which of them has the weight of truth for your specific life at that specific moment. Discernment requires internal listening first. Without internal listening, all external sources are equal in weight, and you remain lost between opinions, always agreeing with the last person you talk to. With internal listening, you can hear advice without being dominated by it. You consult, but you do not depend. You read, but you do not surrender to the book. You love, but you do not annul yourself in the other. For many people, this turn happens after 40, not by chance. Before 40, you are still building roles. Son or daughter who needs to meet parents' expectations. Professional who needs to prove value to the market. Partner who needs to fit into an inherited romantic expectation. Father or mother who needs to model what they learned. All of this asks for constant consultation because you are adjusting pieces. After 40, something changes silently. You start to realize that many of the pieces you adjusted were not yours. They were inherited models, outside ideals, projections you incorporated without reviewing, and a silent process of returning begins. You return each piece that is not yours to the shelf of the one who lent it to you, without rancor, without drama. And what remains is simpler, lighter, and infinitely truer. This process of returning is exactly what is underway in you now, at this moment in your life. The late warnings are signs that you are ready to start returning. The disappointments with old mentors are parts of the process of repositioning each one in the real place that belongs to them, without idealization and without demonization. The growing loneliness you feel at times is not abandonment. It is space opening up inside you to welcome a voice that was always there, and that you are finally managing to listen to without the noise of the other voices that occupied the internal sound environment. If up to here this video is describing the exact phase you are in, do one concrete thing now. Share this video with that person you know is living the same silence as you. You don't need to explain anything in the message, just send the link. If they are ready, they will understand on their own. If they aren't, maybe they will be in a few months. Sharing deep content is a way of caring for people without invading their time. It is leaving the door open without pushing anyone inside. There is one last layer to this conversation that needs to be said before we close today. When the structure of the internal investigator begins to fall, a strange period comes that many people don't know how to interpret and end up regressing. You will feel, for a few weeks or months, lonelier than ever. Not because people disappeared from your life, because you stopped asking of them what they could never give you. And this pause, at first, seems like absence, seems like distance, seems like something is wrong with your relationships. You got used to spending your whole life looking for stamps. Suddenly you stop, and the silence that was once filled by constant consultations becomes an open space that scares you. This fright is absolutely normal. It is the fright of someone who gets off the scaffolding and discovers they can walk alone for the first time. The legs tremble in the first steps. The sensation of imminent fall is constant. But the fall doesn't happen. You are just not used to supporting yourself without permanent external support, and in a few weeks, the trembling passes. The legs steady, and you discover a stability you had never experienced before. The stability of someone who does not depend on approval to know, of someone who does not need validation to feel, of someone who does not demand a stamp to trust what they received. This stability has a name in almost all the serious spiritual traditions of the world. In some it is called wisdom, in others it is called presence, in others it is called inner listening, in others it is simply called spiritual adulthood. Regardless of the name you prefer, the practical experience is the same. A sensation of arriving home inside yourself, a calm perception that the source was always available, and that all the previous external searching was just the long but necessary path to recognize what was within reach the whole time. Most people never reach this point, not because it is inaccessible, because it is scary, because the ego prefers a flawed system with known intermediaries to a true system with direct responsibility. But you, who are here, watching until this moment of this video, are clearly ready to cross this threshold. Otherwise, you would have closed the video at the first discomfort. The fact that you stayed means something inside you recognized the truth of what is being said. And this recognition by itself is already the concrete beginning of the change. You will not go back to being who you were before this video. Not exactly. Something has already moved inside you while you were watching. There is no complete return after this recognition. You can try to go back to the old habits of excessive consultation, but they will leave a strange taste in your mouth. You can try to outsource important decisions again, but you will quickly realize that it no longer fits who you are becoming. Your internal structure has changed, and when the structure changes, it does not undo the change out of nostalgia. I wanted to close this video with one last image that will stay with you for the next few days if you let it. Imagine that for many years you lived in a house full of furniture that other people chose for you. Each room was comfortable in an outside way, but it was comfortable. You got used to it, you thought that was how one lived. One day you start removing furniture piece by piece, without a defined plan. A sofa that was never yours, a bookshelf you never really read, a painting hung because of someone else's taste. As the house empties, the fear increases. You start to think you will be left with nothing, that the house will be cold, empty, without identity. But at the exact moment the house becomes completely empty, something surprising happens. The space reveals itself, and for the first time you see the real size of the rooms, the original shape of the walls, the light that came through the window and that you didn't notice because it was blocked by the borrowed furniture, the view that was always there and that was covered up. And the house empty is more yours than it ever was when it was full. Because now you can choose calmly each piece that enters. And each piece that enters as a conscious decision, not as an automatic inheritance. Your spiritual life is exactly in this process of emptying. The late warnings, the disappointments with guides, the sensation of growing loneliness, the distrust of previous certainties, the slight fatigue with formulas that once worked. All of this is furniture being removed. It is not the destruction of your spiritual life, it is its preparation. And soon, your inner house will be empty enough for you to see, for the first time, the real size of what you have always been underneath everything they told you that you were. In the next video, we will talk about what enters this new house first. What are the first pieces you choose when you are finally free to choose consciously? And why many people, at the exact moment they gain this freedom, make the mistake of furnishing everything again in a hurry, with haste, with anxiety, and lose the rare opportunity to live a few months in the open space before filling it up again. This next video is one of the most important conversations we will have on this channel, and I really want you to be here for it. Bell activated, subscription done, and I'll see you there. For today, stay with this. The warning didn't arrive late. You are the one who finally became ready to receive it. The silence was not abandonment, it was patient sculpting. The figure you consulted inside will not be punished. It will be dismissed with gratitude for the service it provided at the moment it was necessary. And your direct listening, which was always available, now begins to be exercised every day, with small acts of loyalty to what you feel before submitting it to the world. This is how one is born again in maturity, without trumpets, without spectacle, without a date marked on the calendar, only with the firm silence of someone who returned to the home of themselves and discovered that the door was always unlocked.
Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life, a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming, with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10,000 readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you, who were tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.